Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Human Services Joint Subcommittee meeting. I will call this meeting to order. Will the committee secretary please call the roll?
Senator Cannizzaro. Senator Dondero Loop.
Here.
Senator Hammond. Senator Kiekefer.
Here.
Senator Ratty.
Here.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Here.
Assemblywoman Carlton.
Here.
Assemblyman Frierson. Assemblyman Roberts.
Here.
Assemblywoman Titus.
Here.
Assemblywoman Tolles.
Here.
Assemblyman Watts.
Here.
And Chair Monroe Moreno.
And I am here. If you will mark Speaker Frierson and Majority Leader Cannizzaro present as they arrive. I know they are both running just a little late this morning. And welcome, committee. Today we have a few bill presentations from here. And in the interest of time, we will move right to our presenters. Our first is yours for the public that are watching. You can express any public comment at the end of today's meeting. And for the members on this meeting, please keep your cameras on and your other electronic devices off so that we can keep the noise level down for more accurate minutes. So to our DETR team, good morning and welcome to the subcommittee. And you can start with your presentation.
Good morning. Happy Tuesday to everyone. Thank you for taking time to hear DETR's rehabilitation budget on the agenda this morning. On behalf of Administrator Hendren, we have Drazen Ellis, Vocational Rehabilitation's Deputy Administrator of Operations, and he will be presenting the rehabilitation budget today. We also have Michelle Merrill and Jana Vaughn, our Program Deputy Administrators, who will be available for program-specific questions that you might have. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Drazen Ellis to walk you through the agency's budget today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is Drazen Ellis. I'm the Services Deputy Administrator for the DETR's Rehabilitation Division. You can go to the next slide, please. So today we'll present, as I mentioned, the Rehabilitation Division's budget. Just wanted to mention that this is, I guess, for the sake of protocol, this is my first time doing a budget, so I apologize for any, I guess, fluctuations in my voice or any mistakes that I make throughout this, but I'm sure we'll, anyways, I apologize. All right, so on the first slide here, what we have is the mission statements for the Rehabilitation Division. The reason why we have two different mission statements has to do with the nature of the structure of the Rehabilitation Division. The unifying theme of the division is helping individuals with disability to gain financial independence. Our division does this in a couple different ways. One way is by obtaining employment, by helping individuals obtain employment through removal or mitigation of barriers to employment, which lead to then competitive integrated employment and self-sufficiency. The other manner is by assisting individuals with disabilities with financial independence, which is gained by receipt of disability medical benefit payments through SSA programs. The next slide, please. The structure of the Rehabilitation Division the Rehabilitation Division is made up of 5 budget accounts. Today we'll be only hearing about 3 of them. That will be the Bureau of Service to Blind and Visually Impaired, the budget account 3254, as well as Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation, which is budget account 3265. Both of these budget accounts are pretty similar in nature, as they both assist in removing barriers to competitive integrated employment for Nevadans with disabilities. And they do this through service such as training, education, work readiness, and such. The difference between the two is in the type of clients that they serve. Bureau of Services to the Blind, Visually Impaired. Through each name, you can see that it serves individuals with visual impairments and individuals who are blind. While Bureau of Recreational Rehabilitation serves individuals with general disability category. You'll also be hearing about Bureau of Disability Education, which through accurate medical determinations helps Nevadans to claim Social Security benefits. Next slide, please. So on this table here, we wanted to just present the general overview of the rehab's budget. The first thing is that we just want to mention that we will not be asking for any new positions in this biennium. Also, I would like to point out that the orange numbers that are there in the middle of the slide, that is the general fund percentage of the entire rehab's budget. And from there, you can see that there's only a couple of our budget accounts that receive general fund. That is the Bureau budget account 3265, which is Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation, which is right there in the middle column, as well as Bureau budget account 3254, which is Bureau of Service to Blind, Visually Impaired. Both of these receive about 4.81, as you can see, and 1.02 as percent of the general fund. Bureau of Disability Education, which is budget account 3269, is the other one we'll be hearing today. That is our largest budget account. It has 148 full-time positions, and that budget account receives zero general fund, as it is 100% federally funded. So while the other point I would like to make is that while the general fund seems like a very small percentage of these budget accounts, only 4% or 1%, it is actually very critical in how they function due to the general fund, due to the nature as to how we received our federal grant and how our division is funded. We're funded through a federal match grant, and the general fund dollars are a critical component of that, as we first have to be able to expend those, and then based on them, we're able to draw down close to $4 in federal funds. And we'll have some more slides that go a little bit more detailed in explaining that part. So if I can go to the next slide, please. All right. So for the next few minutes, we'll be first going over the budget accounts 3265 and 3254. This is Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation, Bureau of Service to Blind, Visually Impaired. We will present these two budgets combined, as they're both funded by the same federal grant, and they're funded with the same purpose. The only difference being, as I mentioned earlier, is disability category of the applicants. As I will refer to both of these bureaus jointly as vocational rehabilitation. And again, as I mentioned, the goal of them is the removal or mitigation of barriers to employment. Also, both of these bureaus are part of Governor's workforce development system, as we work with the particular constituents in assisting them in kind of finding the employment. And I think our services will be in even greater need as the economy starts recovering from the COVID experience that we're facing. So next slide, please. So with this slide, we just wanted to present the purpose of the vocational rehabilitations. So again, the budget accounts 3265 and 54. And with this slide, we just wanted to just showcase why we are here and why vocational rehabilitation matters. On there, you can see that the poverty rate, one of the biggest reasons is that the individuals with disabilities experience much higher poverty rates, 2.5 times those of individuals without disabilities. So as you can see on that little icon on the right, the number of working age Nevadans with disabilities is over 320,000, and the poverty rate amongst those is about 25%. Also, individuals with disabilities experience much lower employment rates compared to their counterparts without disabilities, where over 50% of individuals with disabilities working age are not employed, where that number is drastically lower for those without disabilities. These two budget accounts serve about 5,000 annually of individuals, of clients. The numbers vary throughout between the years, anywhere between 4,500, 5,500. We'll be able to provide you later on in the presentation. We'll be able to provide you with a little bit more definitive numbers there. The other point I want to mention is that these lines are served by 135 full-time positions statewide, and most importantly, with this, one of the reasons why we put this quote out there is that people with disabilities make up nations, and with that also Nevada's largest minority group, as well as that is the only group that any one of us can become a member at any time. So we feel that with our advocacy and support that we provide with this group, we are helping all of us, as we are helping also individuals that we know who have disability. We also help individuals who may unfortunately get to that, become part of that category as well. And we feel that our these two budget accounts serve a great cause and are very important, and will become increasingly important to recovery of the Nevada's economy. Next slide, please. Here, just wanted you to meet Brandon. We also wanted to share through not just numbers and quotes. We also wanted to share why rehabilitation division matters and what do successful outcomes look like in our world. So as you meet Brandon, he's one of our clients with a significant physical barriers to employment. But besides that, that's not what defines him. He's still just a regular guy who, like regular young adult who loves games and sports, has a great sense of humor and such. So by him participating in our customized employment services, those resulted in job exploration, so work-based experience at archery range at Wasting Arrows in Reno. While working there, the supervisor of this location really fell in love with Brandon and offered him a full-time job. Throughout this pandemic, Brandon has been able to maintain his employment at this employer, and not just that, but also his supervisors reported that he is one of the best range masters that they have. The only investment besides the training and some of the other aspects they spent on in this case is the accommodation. And sometimes we think about the accommodations being very technical and costing a lot of money. In this case, the accommodation was only a hand-operated buzzer instead of a vessel that Brandon uses to in his employment. So we just want to also show that some situations we're very frugal with state's money, and we ensure that we don't always just buy the best that's out there. We try to really figure out what it would be the best solution for that individual. In some cases, those solutions are not expensive, and some they are. Next slide, please. And this is very also critical slide that we feel we wanted to present, and it is the return on investment for the vocational rehabilitation. The return on investment study was, well, it was calculated internally, was based on a larger independent study that was sponsored by a federal oversight agency, RSA. The study measures VR's impact to states' economies, in this case, Nevada's economy. If I can just point out that for every general fund dollar that is invested by the state into the VR program, the state saves $16.73 over the life of the client. So there is a 16 times return on investment, which is not something that's easily seen out there in the competitive world. So these dollars are returned to the state in terms of taxes and decreased benefits from the public programs that these individuals would benefit from. Excuse me. Also, besides, just to wrap up the last slide, besides the investment that we have, that the state would provide, and just as we move on from just the number perspective, we also wanted to mention that now Nevada not only gets to save the money by investing in the VR and doing the right thing, but also it now gets more productive members of society that are paying into the tax system and are leading fulfilled lives. So on this slide, we'll start moving on into more our budgetary situation and budgetary needs. We just wanted to first second. Just wanted to illustrate the various pressures that our agency has been faced with. Some of them are due to the current pandemic, and some of them are a result of some kind of longer trends that the agency has been facing. So on the right-hand side, you can see some of the external pressures. Those are the ones generated by the situation in the economy that we necessarily cannot control, and that situation in general economy with increase in employment has led to reduction in general fund, which is something that a lot of agencies are facing. Besides that, as the general fund match is reduced for us, we also are going to see reduction in associated federal funds. As I mentioned, increase in employment and individual disabilities, as we've seen, are much more partially affected by those downturn in economic conditions. We also, because of that, we see potential significant increase in new client applications. And also we see potential increase in number of returning clients that maybe we have found a job for, but are now not coming back as their places where they have started their employment. Maybe they're closed or they have started reduction in the workforce. On the other hand, we also have a lot of the internal pressures that we'll be touching on in following slides, and some of those have to do with, for example, pre-employment transition services, which is a new requirement that came out of Workforce Innovation Act just passed in 2014. We also have had impact to our soft match as we've had a loss of the third-party cooperative arrangements. One of those was also a partner that we've had that has entered into this arrangement with us, who due to their budget cuts has had to cut out a very successful program, which was in addition to that, we also have due to the downturn in economy and the closure of a lot of the state's offices, there's been a significant impact to also the agency's blind business enterprise program as well, and with that reduction in some of the soft mesh there. And lastly, we'll touch upon how Section 10 of the appropriation bill also is impacting our funding, and ability to draw down additional federal match. So next slide, please. So as we, so on this slide, you can see the summary of the proposed budget reduction, as well as of the proposed general fund that's been allocated to our division. So the first line there on table on the left-hand side, if we start with the first line, general fund that's been allocated to our division, it is 2.8 million for 2022, and state fiscal year 2022, and 2.7 million for state fiscal year 2023. The difference between first and second row are the reduction of the general fund for our two budget accounts, 6554. So that reduction is 437,536 respectively, and then the total of those two is that image on the left, so on the right. So for a total of the total general fund cap of 6.5 million, our two budget accounts have experienced reduction of 974,000, which is 14.9% of the agency's budget. We will explore a bit more in detail how this general fund reduction has a much broader effect to our agency, besides just the $974,000 that this biennium would be cut for. Next slide, please. So, so if we start with those first two numbers from the previous, slide regarding the general fund reduction, so $437,000. Those are the first two. That's the first row on this slide, and 536,000. So the total reduction for our agency would be 974,000, which ends up being only 2.2% of total agency's budget. So 95 of the $95 million. The subsequent federal funds that would be impacted by us not being able to spend these general funds is that next line, the federal Section 110 grant. So as we are not able to, for example, in state fiscal year 2022, as we are not able to draw down 437,000 general fund and expend those on VR related activities, we also are not able to draw down now $1.6 million in the federal funds. So the total impact for state fiscal year 2022 is $2.2 million. Or if we move all the way to the right, the totals for the two biennium would be $974,000 in general fund cut, which would then result in us not being able to draw down $3.6 million in federal funding, and a total impact to the agency will be $4.5 million. The important point here is that while the impact of the agency in terms of budget reduction is only 2.2% reduction, the overall cuts, because of this federal match component, it ends up being 10.5% of our budget cuts. And another question arises, now that the agencies, that our two bureaus don't have these funds, where is that represented? And then you can see the impact is in reduction of staffing, as well as impact to our client service budget account, which is the greatest at 4.3 million. Next slide, please. So in this slide, we just have it broken down by each division and corresponding enhancement units, as the previous slide summarized them. Next slide. In the previous slide, in slide 11, we discussed the client service. So it was just a couple of slides ago, and that impact. So we wanted to also show you the historical overview of the client service budget for these two budget accounts. And as you can see, over the 20+ year history, in the past, our client service budget has been a lot higher, and we've been funded even in 2011 to the tune of $12 million, which was right after the recession in 2008. And you can see that on the right-hand side, the budget levels for this client service budget category are significantly smaller compared to history, and this chart is not adjusted for inflation. So just in the actual dollars, we are having even up to a third less in funding for this particular client service category. Also, what I wanted to point out is on this page, you can the bars that are there. There's one part is blue, the other part is green. The green part is the general fund aspect of these of this budget category. So you can see that only a small part of the general fund or small allocation of the general fund, we are able to draw down a significant portion of the federal funding. And as that general fund has decreased over the years, so has our client service expenditure budget. The light blue area or the grayish area, that is the budget cuts that are being proposed in this budget, in the government budget behind you. And you can see even that without those budget cuts, we're still pretty low in our funding for this categories, and with those cuts, our funding levels are pretty extremely low on that end. Next slide, please. With this slide, we wanted to illustrate the potential impact that the cuts to client services could have on our clients. These are not the actual impacts because we don't necessarily know how many clients are going to be served. What we do know is what the average cost per case is, and that is $3,342. And if we take, so if you look at the middle column, for example, the state fiscal year 2022, the client services budget reduction amount, including the general fund and the federal portion, is 1.9 million. And if we divide that by $3,300, we get to about 581 individuals that might be impacted by these reduced funding. Next slide, please. So this is another aspect that's having an impact on our budget, and that is the inflation and the inflationary cost of the services that we provide. So with this slide, these are some of the most common expenditures that our agency will have. For example, assessment, which is our number one expenditure. Over 1,000 individuals have received assessment services. And last year, for example, we spent $1.5 million on these particular services. That one has gone up about 141%. Also, with passage of VIOA, one of the missions or one of the goals of our agency, besides just providing the employment to individuals, is also assisting them in getting into careers, which requires us to spend to help individuals get into education. So 4-year college degrees or occupational and vocational training that you can see there in the bottom right. And these also, as over the last few years, we have assisted individuals in kind of enrolling in various different colleges, obtaining degrees such as nursing or some of these in-demand degrees that are needed in Nevada. Our expenses have also drastically gone up, and you can see the 4-year college degree, the per case cost is 600% more than it was 6 years ago. Or our occupational vocational training is gone up by 200%. For example, in the occupational vocational training, the expenses, the annual expenses that we have last year were over $1.1 million. So, next slide, please. All right, so this now this is yet another aspect that is having an impact on our budget account and on our budgets for these two divisions. That is the new mandate from the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, which was, as I mentioned, passed in 2014. And with this act, the vocational rehabilitation division has been instructed that we have to spend at least 15% of its full federal Section 110 grant for the provision of pre-employment residential services to students with disabilities. And what I would like to stress is that these services that we need to provide are very narrow in nature. They're only specific to career exploration and don't necessarily lead to employment outcomes. These funds have to be reserved. This 15% has to be reserved from the entire grant that we received, not just reserved from the client services. And also, we are not able to spend these particular funds on any administrative expenses, so they have to be spent specifically on client services and only on a specific narrow focused client services. May just phone a friend. Just kidding. I may just ask Michelle Merrill, Deputy Administrator of Programs, if there's anything else that she would like to add to this slide.
Thank you, Drazen. Michelle Merrill for the record. Absolutely. I think what's important to mention here, as Drazen said, is that this 15% is out of our entire allocation, and it's so important because there's only 5 things that we can do for student specific. It's job exploration counseling, work-based learning experiences, which may happen on the school campus for the student or off. We provide counseling on opportunities for enrollment in comprehensive transition or post-secondary programs to make sure that students with disabilities are aware of their post-secondary opportunities for college and vocational training, and workplace readiness to develop their social skills and independent living skills, because a lot of these students are very young, starting 14, 15, 16, and they have none of those experiences, and we want them to make well-informed decisions about their futures. And most importantly, in my opinion, is the instruction in self-advocacy, because all people, not just people with disabilities, but all people need to understand their rights and have that self-motivation for their futures. And so that's one of the most important things that PREETS does. And I think that we can't understate the impact, because taking this 15% off the top greatly reduces what is left for the balance of the population that we serve. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Next slide, please. So as Michelle has mentioned, as we talked about already, this 15% is not 15% off of our client services, but 15% off of the entire federal grant award. And as you can see here, as we go back to that same slide that we've seen earlier, the general client services slide, but this time we wanted to present the client service budget that's spent on general population versus the client service part of the budget that's spent on the pre-EDS population, which is in orange, part of the bar graph. And you can see that we started spending for those expenses can be seen starting with 2015. So after the passage of the VO Act, and there's slowly becoming a larger percentage of the client service that we serve. So as we look at, for example, 2012 or 11, and our client service budget is $12 million that the agency is able to spend on the entire population of the clients that we serve. Now, for example, in our budget in 2021, we only have $2 million available for general population, where the remainder of that is only available for the pre-EDS clients. So next slide, please. And go back to this same concept. The point we also wanted to point out that the pre-EDS expenditures are now capturing over, or are becoming over 50% of the client services budget. So while it's only 15% of the federal grant, they're becoming larger percent of this general client services. So all of the 5,000 plus clients that we serve per year, minus pre-EDS, have to be served out of this much smaller part, the dark blue part, where our smaller population, the pre-EDS, has to be served out of the orange portion of these bar graph. Next slide. All right. So with this one, we just want to illustrate in general how the federal match program, how does our federal match grant work. So for every dollar that the state that the state spends that uses using the non-federal match source of funds, we are able to draw down close to $4 in federal funds. So the exact formula that's used is 21.3% of net federal match, and for every one of those dollars that's spent, the agency is able to draw down corresponding 78.7% of the federal grant. Next slide. In our prior biennium, this was the makeup of that non-federal match. The largest portion has been a general fund at 58% of that overall match. We also are able to use the Blind Business Enterprise in Nevada program. Some of their expenditures our federal agency has designated as the expenditures which are allowable to be used as soft match. So some of the activities that program has, we're able to draw down the federal funds for. We also have the third-party cooperative arrangements that we're also able to use as soft match. And in the prior biennium, that was 14% of our overall non-match. Next slide. And due to the current COVID situation and the situation of the economy, that has resulted in us losing some of these third-party cooperative arrangements. Most notably, the biggest loss is to our voice program, which was with Washoe School District. This program was one of our was very productive for us, and Michelle will talk a little bit more about that one. But due to the current situation, we're looking at internally where we are able to cut some costs and maybe which programs are expensive compared to others. And one of the decisions that we have had to make is to reduce cancel 3 of our third-party cooperative arrangements, as we found that the expenditures for those, and it was, as we've done the return on investment calculations on those, they ended up costing about $200 to $400 more than our general cases. And with that, we just wanted to ensure that all of the monies that the program receives, or that these two bureaus receive, are spent as wisely as they could be in this situation. And Michelle, is there anything else that you would like to add to this slide?
Thank you, Drazen. Michelle Merrill for the record. As Drazen said, we were saddened when we lost our third-party cooperative arrangement with Washoe County School District, our voice program. It was our flagship program, and it was certainly our largest opportunity to spend our pre-ed services funds. But we understand our partners had to make difficult choices too, and as did we. And so with the loss of that one, it forced us to meet the other budget cuts. We had to look at our remaining third-party cooperatives with the community college system, TMCC, WNC, and the Clark County School District with our JEEP program. And as Drazen said, these were valued programs, but in these times you have to look at numbers, and sadly, the cost to these were 200 to 400% more per individual participating than in our traditional casework. So those difficult choices had to be made. And that leaves us where we're at now, trying to go forward with the remaining budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. This is Drazen Ellis for the record. So with this, I guess the place that we end up being is that we general fund and then soft match are becoming much more important and bigger parts of this non-federal match that we have. And our big concern, besides the general fund, is the best soft match, which, while budgeted at about 35% of our match, we feel due to these economic conditions, we may not be able to achieve the economic activity in that program that will result in creating that 35%. Next slide. And this is the slide that talks about the Blind Business Enterprise Program. So while we're not talking about the Blind Business Enterprise Program in terms of their budget in this presentation, the activities around their program directly impact the Bureau of Service to the Blind as well as Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation. As I mentioned, those activities in that budget that those businesses create, some of those activities could be used as a match. And in our normal year, where those businesses generate about 9.3 million in annual gross revenue, due to COVID and closure of a lot of these businesses, we've seen about 21%, over 30% decrease in COVID-19 impact for in year 2020. In 2021, while we do see some post-COVID recovery and we are on track of hitting about 7.3 million in gross revenue, we're still unsure when we will return to that normalcy in terms of the annual gross revenue. Part of that has to do with the locations of the businesses. They're located in usually public sites. As more agencies are struggling with their budgets, they may see cuts in staffing, which may result in cuts in office spaces throughout the state. These will then have negative impact on our blind businesses because now some of these businesses may need to be closed. So as far as the impact of COVID on Blind Business Enterprise Program, I think we'll only be able to see that after a few years, because it will take a few years probably in our estimates for everything to for the economy to get back to some level of normalcy where we'll see those changes. We'll see the government take a little bit more. We'll have a little bit more stable situation as far as the funding of different bureaus and such. Next slide. Chris, you're gonna have to click a couple of times on that. All right. So on this, this is yet another way that our budget has been impacted, and it's been impacted for a few years. So this is here we're talking about the appropriations bill or Section 10 restriction in the appropriation bill, which is also was known as Section 7 in the prior years. I believe this was passed in 2012. I'll just briefly read through the actual language. So as I mentioned, this is often referred to as Section 7. So the specific language from and the prohibition or the restriction of this bill says that if an agency removes money from other source, the portion provided by the appropriation from the state general fund must be decreased to the extent that the receipts of the money from other sources is exceeded, but such a decrease must not jeopardize the receipt of such money as is to be received from other sources. So we feel that with the passage of this bill, it restricts the agency in a few ways, where now we have a 2-year VR grant that due to this restriction, we are able to fully meet or expend. One of the reasons is because of the version of general fund not expended, we have a loss of associated federal funds that could have been drawn down. Also, this particular restriction minimizes our ability to carry forward federal funds. So as I mentioned, we have our grant allowances for 2 years, but as we have to spend all our money in a 12-month period, we are not able to fully take advantage of that. The additional part is logistics of spending funds in a 12-month period due to the state processes. So here we're talking about whether it's procurement process, us getting a contract in place could take anywhere between 3 to 6 months. us getting a work program done. If we do have funds that we have received, can also take a couple, 2 to 6 months. So if these funds are received close to the end of the state fiscal year, we get to a place where we're not able to quickly expend the funds that we have to fully take advantage of all of our general fund. So we always end up in a loss of state and federal grant funds. Michelle, did you have anything else to add on this item?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Next slide. So, and this slide helps illustrate some of the impact of that Section 10 fund. And so this slide, which you see, the orange part is the federal grant that was awarded, that's been awarded to our agency over the last close to 30 years, close to 20 years. Apologize. And the blue line presents the funds that have been extended. And as you can see, from 2002 to 2008, the agency's been expending pretty close to what's been awarded by the federal government besides federal fiscal year 2009. Part of that was due to receipt of our funds, and the other part is due to some of the cuts as the recession of 2008 hit. And then for a couple more years, 2010 and 11, we've been able to spend close to the full amount of that federal grant. And with the passage of Section 7 in 2012, you can see these two lines slowly diverging. In some of our recent efforts in 2016, 17, 18, we've been able to start closing this gap slowly with the introduction of some other non-federal funds match sources. Part of that was third-party copyright arrangements. Part of that was increasing activity that the BEM program has. However, due to the current situation with the COVID that everybody's been experiencing, we are estimating that the federal grants that's going to be awarded for us is going to keep growing. According to some of our calculations, the grant projected to be received in federal year 21 would be about $31 million. However, as you can see by this chart, we will increasingly not be able to receive that full grant that could be then brought into Nevada and put into Nevada's economy. Next slide, please. So what does all of this mean for us? All of these different slides that we went through that just kind of displayed difficult situation that our agency we see it's gonna be at. We feel that, or not that we feel, but in our estimates, the current level of funding that the agency is budgeted for, we will, with the current level of funding, the agency will not be able to fully serve all the individuals that will be eligible for our services, especially as we look for an increasing number of clients due to the current economic climate. So a state vocational rehabilitation agency is required to implement an order of selection when it anticipates that it will not have sufficient fiscal and personnel resources to fully serve all of our clients. So what this means is that we would end up having a wait list for our clients. That wait list will have to be organized by categories. It also means that we would only, based on those categories, we will only be able to serve individuals who have a significant, who have multiple significant barriers to employment and disabilities. And the other huge impact of that is that by having these waiting lists, by only serving a very narrow scope of Nevadans, we no longer end up being a tool in governor's toolbox in helping Nevada's economy get back to work, as now we will not be able to serve this general population of individual disabilities and we would only have to focus on those with the most significant disabilities. The other individuals would go on the waiting list or be able to maybe receive services from some other sources open to general public out there. According to also our estimates that we said we would have somewhere around 1,200 people on the waiting list if this was to be implemented. Michelle, was there any other points you were looking to make on this slide?
Yes, Drazen, thank you. Michelle Merrill for the record. Never in the history of the Nevada VR program have we been in the position of looking at or facing an order of selection. It's a pretty daunting prospect from a VR program perspective because it means that you can't serve the entire general public that seeks your services. And as Drazen said, being part of the governor's toolbox for employment, it would be a large portion of people with disabilities that won't receive our services because they do not have a high enough priority to be in the ranking to get services first. Also, as Drazen said, there would be the 3 priority categories, and those are based on severity of disability. How many major life activities or functions are impaired by the disability, 2 or more, 1 or more, creating that priority. And when you think about our ability to serve 5,000 people, give or take, in an average year, the inability to serve 1,200 most likely off the top is a devastating number for us. And again, that means that many more people that we have a reduced likelihood of helping seek employment, helping achieve, competitive and integrated employment, keeping them from benefiting or receiving other services, Social Security services, things like that, other opportunities. So this is a huge impact for us. And states do a lot of things to try to avoid going into order of selection. No state sees order of selection as something welcome. In 2018, 67% of all VR programs nationally, 16 out of 24 were in order of selection, and 2 out of 24 blind programs are only 8%, and 20 out of 32 combined programs, meaning the Voc Rehab program and the Blind Services program, having combined funding, were in order of selection. So you can see that states really try to avoid it because it is not uncommon for states who go into order of selection to struggle to get back out of it. Some states have been in order of selection since the 1970s. And you can see how that would be a real deficit to people with disabilities in their program. Some of the things that states do to avoid that is from a fiscal perspective, and that includes the sharing of funding across the Voc Rehab and Blind Services program so that the money isn't segregated. They can pool the funds and do more collectively for their clients. Thank you, Drazen.
Thanks so much, Michelle. The other point also that I wanted to make, that was related to the previous slide, what we propose is, this is Drazen now, for the record again, I apologize. We propose for the agency to be added to the exception, to the list of exempted agencies in that section 10 bill that allows the agency to carry over unspent funds from the prior year and for them to only be carried once. And that we feel that adding that exception language would be something that could, while not adding any additional, without adding any additional general fund to the agency, we'll be able to fully expend the general fund that's allocated to us and expend it fully for that year. Also, it would just create it would allow us to have a lot more flexibilities with our federal grant that now could be expanded to a 2-year grant. And we will be able to mitigate some of these negative impacts of COVID. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to, I guess, bring us back again to the meaning of all of this. We talked a lot about numbers and charts, and we don't want these presentations to turn into something that becomes very sterile. So that's one of the reasons why we try to introduce some of these client success stories and share those with you as well. And we just wanted to meet Joey. He's one of our clients who has several barriers to employment. So as you can see on there, some of them are due to autism and specific learning disabilities. Joy is one of the individuals who also went through our pre-employment transition services and participated in the Project Surge, which is a partnership that we have with VR, Clark County School District, and Sunrise Hospital. And through this Project Surge, Joy was paired with a job that perfectly suited his personality and suited his vocation to want to help people. He currently still has a full-time employment at the hospital and is able to deliver smiles to a lot of those individuals that he serves now as part of his work at the hospital. Next slide. And this is the only enhancement that we have for this budget account, and it is a pretty small enhancement of only $10,000 and $11,000 respectively per each budget year. This enhancement is there to reclassify Administrative Assistant 1 position to a Rehabilitation Tech 3 position. This Tech 3, Rehabilitation Technician 3 would supervise all of the Rehabilitation Technicians 2 that the Rehab Division has. One of the reasons why we are wanting this particular change is to improve the efficiency of our agency. The way that this particular enhancement would do that is by removing supervision from something that the rehabilitation counselors have to do. So instead of them spending a lot of their time in writing evaluations, doing the training for these rehabilitation technicians, they will be able to focus most of their time on serving our clients. So it's a way for us to create more time for our counselors to have with their clients. And also, as we see increase in potential number of clients that will be coming to our doors, the duties of the Administrative Assistant 1 would then be dispersed to other positions. And for a very small amount, we feel that this will be very helpful to our agency. Michelle, was there anything you want to add on this one?
Yes, thank you, Drazen. Michelle Merrill for the record. As Drazen said, it's a relatively small amount, $10,596, but it has a great impact to our agency. We talked to other states in our region to understand their best practices because we are all feeling the pinch, and our counselors, as he said, we're facing increased caseloads as we anticipate people coming back and seeking employment post-COVID, and we want to be best positioned. And having our counselors do a lot of training, because technicians are a very technical role, and it requires a lot of intensive training, and it's a statewide effort, and there's evaluations to be written, and it was not the best use of our counselors' time. And we really want our counselors, who are our most senior and trained staff, to be able to focus on the day-to-day needs of their clients and getting those people employed, and part of the whole system of getting people with disabilities into the workforce. So we knew that we needed to make a change. So by creating this position for a Technician 3 who will be supervising that training and doing the evaluations and maintaining that continuity statewide of the program at the technician level, we really think that that's going to free up our counselors. And we think that that's a best practice, as has been seen in other states. And we recognize that, only asking for one at this point probably seems like a stretch. And in truth, we probably would do better with one in each part of the state. We're piloting that so that we can see the effectiveness, and we know that it's working, and we know that this would be our best practice going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And with that, we conclude the presentation for the budget accounts 3265 and 3254. We would like to take any questions for those two at this point, and then also proceed with the few slides that we have for the budget account 3269.
Thank you so much for the presentation thus far. I know that we have a few questions. I am going to start out our questioning with Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Thank you so much. And my question is specific to the order of preference. And I think that is specific to the budget 3260. No, I think it's 3254. Although I think the order of selection, although I think it might cross around some other budgets. So is it okay if I ask questions about that now, Chairwoman, or is this the right place?
You can go ahead and ask questions. Since both were presented together, we can go between 3254 and 3265.
Okay, perfect. I appreciate that. So the federal government passed the vocational rehabilitation policy in 1973. And am I correct that this would be the first time since then that Nevada has would have to put in place an order of selection to prioritize services to recipients?
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Vice Chair Bernice Thompson. Thompson for the question. Chair Monroe, may I answer the question?
Yes, please. And you can go directly to the member.
Thank you so much. So this is Jocelyn Ellis for the record. Yes, that is, you are correct that this is the first time that Nevada is facing a potential for being on order of selection. I'm going to defer the question to Michelle Merrill. I think she's going to be able to answer it a lot more wholesomely.
Yeah. And I imagine since we haven't been in a place before where we've had to consider or haven't had proposed to the legislature budget cuts this deep and of this nature, that we haven't had the administration go through this exercise of actually trying to figure out how to prioritize the recipients and how to prioritize services to our most needy. But knowing that we might potentially have to do an order of selection to prioritize services, I guess, can you tell us more about the thought process that went into that, or if it's all strictly federal guidance that directs how we do that?
Thank you, Vice Chair Benita Thompson. This is Michelle Merrill for the record. You are correct. There is a selection process that has to happen, and that is a prescribed process from the federal government. And as I said, it's based on, there'll be 3 priority categories. The first priority category is for individuals with the most significant disabilities, as evidenced by a severe physical or mental impairment that seriously limits 2 or more functional capacities and creates a barrier to their employment and requires multiple services over an extended period of time. So that's going to be the first priority. Those that will get services before anyone else are most significantly disabled. The next tier, if we were able with our allotted funding and had the ability to, we would go on to the next tier, which is the secondary category, which are clients with significant disabilities, as evidenced by physical or mental impairments that limit 1 or more functional capacities. So a functional limitation would be like ability to ambulate independently in the community, or individual have an independence in making decisions, or there's many major life activities that could be impacted, but again, it's either 2 or 1. And depending upon that priority, that's how we rank them in service. And the counselors are the ones, when they meet them at the time of their eligibility determination, the counselor looks at the medical evidence provided and determines that category, how severely disabled is the person in our system. And that's how they are ranked in terms of receiving services. The third category, and it's probably categories 2 and 3, honestly, that are going to be impacted by this. So it's not saying that they're not all people with disabilities. It's just saying that they are not as severe as the ones that are going to be guaranteed first opportunity to those services. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Think of a more heartbreaking exercise that you all would have to do and that we have to consider than something like this. Can you tell me the order of selection? Is that something that we see a lot of states use? It's the first time in our history since 1973 or probably 1974, after the policy got implemented, that we're doing this, but does it tend to be a common practice among other states?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Michelle Merrill for the record. As I said, our statistics showing from 2018 show that for VR programs independently, nationally, about 67% of them are in order of selection. And combined programs, both rehab and blind services, about 63% are in order of selection. And in blind only programs, there's only 8%. Blind programs tend to not have that same challenge fiscally, but although it looks like a little better than half, I know from my 24 years in service to Voc Rehab that it is something that we have always avoided tooth and nail. It's never something that we've welcomed. It's something we've tried as hard as we can to stay away from, because we never want to say that somebody can't have our services when they come to our door. Thank you.
That so much. I would hope that's the spirit of the type of conversation that we are able to have at some point. I think it'd be just a devastating precedent to set for us in Nevada. Thank you for letting me ask my questions, Chair.
Thank you. Next, we have Senator Dondero Loop, who will be followed by Senator Kekeffer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple questions, and I agree with Assemblywoman. This is exactly where we need assistance, and we're cutting, and so it's just really tough. What is the impact of the agency's programs of maintaining the vacant Rehabilitation Manager 1 positions as recommended by the governor over the 21-23 biennium? And I'm talking in reference to budget 3265.
Thank you so much for the question. This is Jocelyn Wells, Deputy Administrator, the Rehabilitation Division. Michelle Merrill, would you mind weighing in on that question by Senator Bandera?
Certainly. Thank you, Michelle Merrill, for the record. To you, Senator. The impact to the loss of the Rehab Manager 1, although it does sound deeply impactful, I can tell you that it's not a position that we had had for very long. And because of vacancies, it had not been filled completely for very long. So, and it's been frozen for quite a while. So that impact has somewhat been absorbed. And I think that in these times of challenge, we're trying to look at the places where we can make those cuts, where they will have the least impact. We still have the Rehab Manager 2 position, which has been a consistent position. And this is the Rehab Manager 1 was in our Southern District, and we have a very strong person in our District Manager 2 position, and we have a very strong Bureau Chief that's also in that same office. So we feel that this is probably the best place to hold that position. And it was also a position that served our, in some way, we were hoping that it would serve to some supervision in our blind services program, but that program being so small compared to the Voc Rehab program right now, we know that we need to shift our focus to the Voc Rehab right now, where it's so desperately needed, and again, working to keep us out of order of selection. So that's why that hard decision was made. Thank you.
Okay, and can you then tell me what the impacts of the governor's recommended reduction in client services will have on program participants?
Yes, thank you. Let me flip to that slide. Michelle Merrill for the record. I believe it was on slide 13, where you can see the impact in state fiscal year 2021. The reduction in general fund would essentially, using our formula of $3,342 per average cost per case, could have a potential impact of 263 people, but that grows significantly when you look at state fiscal year 22. That number would go up to 581, and even worse in 2023, where it's potentially at 719. And those numbers could be better or worse depending upon the people that come to us, and we just won't know that based on how the economy turns around as the pandemic eases. Thank you.
Okay, and just as a side note, on on slide 15, where you talked about the increasing costs of services, I'm particularly looking at a 4-year college degree, rehabilitation technology, transportation, all that training, the assessments. I'm looking at that. Do your clients, our community members, have another place, any place else they can go? If I have a high school degree, but I need rehabilitation training, or I need some sort of training to go further into some other position, do I have anywhere else? Do I have any other options?
Thank you, Senator Dondero, Michelle Merrill, for the record. I think that is what the federal financial aid program is certainly for, and our population certainly applies for those. We see those as first dollar funds whenever somebody comes to us, and higher education is a part of their individualized plan for employment. But I think that education is just one part of it. And though our graphic here is showing you that it is going up remarkably 610% over 6 years for a 4-year college degree, that's not the only cost of the case. And for our college program clients, I think that our average case cost of the 3,000 figure is actually probably low, because there's many other things that go into it. There's going to be transportation costs and assistive technology costs. There may be outside medical treatment or evaluations. There could be a gamut of things, tuition that isn't covered for different reasons, why a person may have exhausted their financial aid. Endless number of things that a person would need. If it was just the tuition payment alone, that would be one thing. So I don't think that there's anything that really replicates voc rehab. To answer your question, there are disability resource centers on college campuses, but they don't provide the fully fleshed out services that we do. Counseling and guidance, I think, is irreplaceable, that our counselors provide. So sadly, I don't think that there is a replacement for what we do.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me to ask those questions. I appreciate the time.
Thank you so much. Senator Kekeffer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Thank you, Ms. Merrill, for your presentation. If I could look really quickly at slide 13, it shows sort of the precipitous drop of expenditures in your client services category from $12 million a decade ago to about $2 million for the current fiscal year. A very small piece of that is state general fund. If we would increase general fund appropriations back up to 2010, 2011 levels, would you be able to draw down the same amount of federal funds and have total spending up to about $12 million a year?
I'll let Draza take that one.
Thank you, Mr. Kekeffer. This is Draza Ellis for the record. So we our grant formula is 78.7% in federal match that we would draw down for the for any non-federal match that's put in. We will be able to get back to you that answer. I think right now we just need to do some quick calculation and we can get back to you on that. We definitely, I don't know that we will be able to reach the levels of 2011 and 12, but we would definitely significantly come closer to that. Just as a quick math, we most likely would be able to get to about 2013 levels, but we can definitely answer that question.
So, but the drop in expenditures in that category is in direct relation to the amount of general fund we're appropriating and the federal fund that we're matching. It's not due to a reduction in the number of clients that need to be served, right?
This is Johnson Ellis for the record. That is correct. Yeah, but this is not due to the drop in clients. It's more so due to not having sufficient general fund to be able to draw down the federal funding available. The other ways that what we've done since 2012, as we've seen the general fund drop, is find some other creative ways that we can use as a match to be able to draw down additional federal funds. Part of that was through third-party cooperative arrangements. We've been able to create certain per se profit almost out of managing that program, and then we've been able to use those funds in client services. Also, some of the activities that took place in the Blind Business Enterprise program, and us working with that program and kind of making it more robust, more increasing the number of sites that program has also created some soft match due to which we've been able to draw down some of that. So you are correct that solely the general fund cuts were not the reason why the drop, but we've been able to kind of supplement some of that.
Thank you for that. On the new WIO mandate that requires expenditure of at least 15% of the Section 10 grant awards for pre-employment transition services. Can you talk a little bit more about when that kicked in, and is it a moving target? And if we're eliminating our relationships with the Washington County School District and the Clark County School District, how are you meeting the requirement to expend those dollars?
Thank you, Senator Picaffer. This is Jocelyn. That was that for the record. So the second part of the question, I'm gonna turn it over to Michelle, and she'll be able to answer it more fully. So that to answer the first part, the VOA mandate kicked in starting in 2015. Our federal partners, the Rehabilitation Services Administration, has worked with us over the last few years on that particular expenditures. When the VOA Act was passed, it stated that the state needed to reserve and expend 15% of its Section 110 federal grant, and that's 15% of the whole grant. Those expenses cannot be used for administrative services or anything similar. It's strictly for a very narrow scope of pre-employment transition services for that particular need. So that started in 2015. Initially, we haven't been able to spend that full 15%, and we've been working on that over the course of over these last few years. And as you can see, and the expectation from the federal government is that we will reach that 15% in the upcoming years. So I guess that I think that answers the first part. I'll turn this over to Michelle Merrill for the second portion of the question as far as the impact of the TPCAs and how we may be able to extend those pre-ETS dollars now.
Thank you, Senator Kiekefer. Michelle Merrill for the record. Absolutely, the loss of our third-party cooperatives, which is directly contributed to the COVID pandemic and the difficult choices our partner had to make in Washoe County, we accept, don't love, but we accept, and we are moving forward. And that resulted in the difficult choice we had to make with our partners at Truckee Meadows Community College and Western Nevada College. Again, as I explained before, because of the high cost of those at the per client level, we just had to make those unfortunate, tough decisions so we could serve more people. And I appreciate the question about what are we doing after the fact. The way that we're trying to spend our pre-ETS money, our pre-employment transition services money, now has been greatly hindered in COVID, as you can imagine, because students certainly learn best face-to-face. And traditionally, our pre-employment transition services were delivered face-to-face, but in the pandemic, we've had to do everything virtually. We've resulted to doing a lot of pre-ETS camps that will focus on between 1 and 5 of those pre-employment transition services and do a deep dive with a small group of students. We were able to provide 3 camps virtually since March of 2020 when the pandemic began, and that benefited 60 students. Sadly, we had to cancel 10 camps that we had on planned for the summer that were going to be delivered in person. And 2 of those were converted into the virtual camps that we ultimately did 3. The good news, though, is that we have 12 new camps that we're bringing forward this summer, as well as our summer youth internship program, where we work to bring VR transition students into state offices so they can have the experience that we all experience on a day-to-day basis of working for the state, and seeing that might trigger something in them for their futures, which we hope will play into the use of our 700-hour program, which we're very proud of. And we still have in Clark County, though we are losing our Jeep program, as I discussed, we still have a number of programs that we're doing. We have our POST program, post-secondary opportunities for students in transition. In Clark County, we have job discovery program in Clark County as well. That's through Opportunity Village. POST is through Clark County. We have the PACE program, which is on assigned Clark County high school campuses. And again, it's a supported and competitive employment model, giving them work-based learning experiences. Job Discovery 2, which is the next phase of JDP 1. It's with the City of Henderson, Heritage Park, the Senior Center Culinary Arts of Las Vegas, St. Rose Hospital, St. Martin Campus, and 3 Square Food Bank. We have Project Search, which is one of our flagship programs that takes place in hospital settings, giving these students a rotation through the different programs in the hospital, some clerical work, custodial work, warehousing, food service, and it gives them exposure to a medical setting, because we know that is one of our most in-demand jobs in Nevada, is anything in the medical field. And another program called YES, which is for 11th and 12th graders, Your Educational Success, and it's a college or vocational program on CSN campuses. So we're striving really hard to find things that are meaningful that we can do to replace those losses, and we are constantly in development of new things. We're in the process of working on something with Nevada Hope, which is a program in Las Vegas to get young people from high school straight into a boot camp program to help them become certified nurses assistants so that they can go into medical professions. And we're creating an opportunity for stacked credentials so they can matriculate up as they want to and as they are able to higher paying and more prestigious opportunities in the medical field. So we're doing our best to try to find things to take up that slack. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I certainly understand your passion. This is probably not the budget that you want to present. Probably not the one that we want to pass either, I hope. So let's figure out ways to flesh it out a little bit, give you more good stuff like all that you just mentioned to talk about. Thanks.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Carlton.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and following right along behind Senator Kickefer. So I was going right where you were going, Senator. Yeah, we should flesh this out and have a little bit more conversation. And I was trying to remember some of the conversations that we had last session, and luckily was able to get some numbers from staff. And I'd like to dig into the reversion issue a little bit. I know that was an issue last session also. So it's my understanding that the money is reverted every year, that $1 million was reverted in 18, 1.3 was reverted in 17, a little over 600,000 in 19. So I think we should have a conversation about the reversion factor, and not necessarily leaning towards carryover and constantly going, but the fact that the dollars are not pulling down the federal dollars. And if they don't pull them down within a certain period of time, that's an issue. So if someone could expand upon that, because it's hard to talk about putting money in and doing things when it turns around and gets reverted. So I think we need to have a comprehensive conversation about that. And I know over the interim, there was supposed to be a conversation about that as far as a proposal in the Authorizations Act that was to be changed, but I believe the goal was basically to work with other agencies to see how they made sure that they pulled their federal match down. So if someone could just walk us through what they see the issue on the match is so that we're aware of it and why we have these large reversions?
Thank you, Assemblywoman Carlton. This is Jocelyn Ellis, Deputy Administrator, Reclassification Division, for the record. So you're absolutely correct. The version of the general fund and the subsequent version of the federal dollars have been an issue for the division for a few years, or since about 2012. In the last during the last session, we were able to present our situation with the Legislative Committee on Senior Citizens, Veterans, and Adults with Special Needs, and that committee has submitted a letter to, I believe, to Governor Sandoval, asking for there to be an exemption for the Rehabilitation Division to be able to carry over its general fund dollars from one state fiscal year to the next, and only for that 1 year, so that we are able to kind of fully draw down the federal funds. One of the reasons why we are not able to fully expend all of our general funds in a course of a 12-month period really has to do with states' rules and requirements that are there that kind of really extend the procurement process. And also, so as an example, if we need a certain, let's say, house modification, for example, for an individual to be able to modify their home so that way, or their vehicle, so that way they're able to travel from their home to their kind of place of employment. The amount of that might be anywhere between $20,000 to $60,000 to $80,000 in terms of that particular accommodation, in order for us to get a contract in place if we don't already have one for some similar services. And there are services out there that we pre-plan that we know are going to happen, and some services that that come as that they may be more that doesn't happen as frequently in these situations. If we have to get a contract in place, there may be a process that takes a few months between getting it approved through procurement purchasing process, then also approved by the BOE and so forth. If we don't have particular funding available, there's also then the need for the work programs and such. All of this kind of extends the timeline. So now if we are not able to fully expend all those general fund, even though we had the process in place, maybe we had the item ordered and whatnot, but if we are not able to fully expend it by that end of the state fiscal year, and I think we only have a month after that for the payment, now we have to refer these funds. The need is still there. We still have to service this client in the upcoming months, but now we can no longer do it from the last years of state money. Now we have to do it from the new funds. We have also worked with some other agencies and haven't really. We spent a lot of time also improving all of our internal processes to be able to have internally more efficient things in place and be able to more quickly expend the funds. But and that was one of the reasons why over the last few years that amount of reversion has decreased. I think we went from close to $1 million to only like over 200,000 last year. But we're still, we still don't see that until we get to a place where we at least have an exemption to be able to carry over the state general fund from 1 year to the next. Only for that 1 year, it can be closed after that. We will not be able to fully expend not just the state general fund, but then draw down the subsequent federal funds. And I hope I'm answering that question correctly. If not, then we can definitely follow up with some more information.
And I appreciate that. You got the top level of it. I think what we should dive into more deeply is, if there's a lot of programs in HHS that do manage to do this, we just want to know if there's a structural issue. We want to get in order to let an agency roll funds over from 1 year to the next. A pretty good argument has to be made for that, because what could ultimately happen, and not saying that it seems like you guys would spend the money, but what could ultimately happen is it rolls over from one year to the next, and at the end of the 2 years, you've got $3 million coming back, and then that $1 million or so sat there, was not used, and could have been used someplace else. Not saying that would be you, but we always want to be careful that when we send those dollars out, that they're being used in a timely fashion. And that's why the reversion clause works, because if it's not being used, we can pull it back and put it someplace else. So there are times when your agency might be the beneficiary of reversion clauses, because we might be able to put those dollars to another use in another budget. So I just think we want to make sure, as we have that discussion, that we understand what exactly you're asking for, and can figure out exactly, where the glitch really is on that. And then there was, and if I may, Madam Chair, I'll do one more, because I know there's a couple other folks who probably have questions, but there was a brief mention of being able to meld the budgets together. Vocational rehab, I believe, and the blind enterprise and the blind fund. That has been proposed a number of times in this legislature. It turns into a very contentious discussion, because each entity feels as though they will not get the same level of attention, because they will be melded together. And there's always a caution of, are the dollars that are supposed to be going to one account go there, dollars for another account? When they get blended together, we've had some constituents who've had some very serious concerns about making sure that the resources that they need are still available. And we want to give you the resources that you need. So I think we should have further discussion on how we look at these dollars, and if it's really the general fund side that's causing the issue, or if it's the federal match side that's causing the issue. And I know staff will be reaching out to you, and we'll be getting more details, because we do want to solve this problem. I'd love to solve this problem before I leave this building. But we just want to make sure that we're not using money in the wrong place, or putting it someplace where it's not getting used at the correct level. So I appreciate your explanation, and we'll continue to have this conversation. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Senator Hammond?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to everybody. I just had probably two questions, but one of the questions goes back to the account 3269, and we're talking about a phone system that will be upgraded from what you're using right now.
Senator Hammond,
Yes.
we haven't gotten to 3269 yet for their presentation.
I apologize, because I'm trying to figure out which ones they covered and which ones they didn't. So we're on 3265 and 3254.
Correct.
Okay, so I'll just go to the question I have for 3265, and it really is more of a half question and a statement. One of the things that you talked about was, of course, the termination of your cooperative arrangements with universities and with the school system. Obviously, during this pandemic, we've had a lot of job loss, but a lot of that may be coming back as we get our economy up and running. However, I think everybody would agree that there are going to be some jobs that just don't come back, and that's for the population you serve as well as the greater population. I'm wondering if you have, and we're all going to see that there's going to be greater numbers of jobs that they're not going to be there anymore. They just don't exist anymore. That business went away, or that industry has diminished to the point where they can't hire people back. So obviously we're going to have to retrain folks. Is there any, and everybody keeps saying that there's going to be a number of people who we need to serve. Any clue as to what that number might be? Is there anybody out there doing any analysis that would give us a clue as to how many people we're going to retrain? Because that's the part that worries me, is that now we're going to see a number of people, and hopefully you have numbers or know of somewhere to get them, of people who need to be retrained, but we're sort of eliminating that ability to do that and get them out there in meaningful employment again. That's definitely a concern. So any answers to that would be great.
This is David Schmidt, Chief Economist for Dieter. And to sort of broadly answer the Senator's question, we are working on our employment projections right now. These are short-term projections that look at what we expect things to be like in the middle of calendar year 2022. And there is definitely an impact to our expected employment numbers across a variety of industries. We don't have those quite published and final yet, but we'll definitely share them with you when they become available. But we are definitely expecting some disruption and some change, and we'll be working with our partners in the VR and other programs in ESD to make sure that those numbers are available to help target services to people who are affected. Excuse me.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. We're kind of looking forward to seeing those numbers. And then just one more quick question on this budget, in particular to the, and I know that Senator Don Loop had mentioned this, the Rehabilitation Manager 1 position. And I'm trying to get a grasp on how this all works. I know that there is, you guys have a step system, and that the base budget is a step 1, but you're talking about it being a step 10. There's a savings difference. When you hire this person back, at what step do you hire? What are you looking at? What step are you looking to hire back at?
Thank you, Senator Hammond. This is Jonathan Ellis for the record. So I think when the agency does its base budgeting for positions that are at that pay grade, they're budgeted at a level 5. However, when it comes to hiring, we hire individuals. I guess we wouldn't start with a goal as to where we're going to slot them as far as the pay grade. We would more hire from looking at like who is the best candidate that's out there. So it could be anywhere from 1 to 10. I guess if somebody's if we end up hiring somebody, for example, from out of state and maybe worked in a vocational rehabilitation type agency in some of the other, in like another state or something like that, because they're starting with the state of Nevada, they will start with pay grade 1. Subsequently, also if it's somebody who's promoted from within the agency, then they also will kind of follow those HR rules. But I guess when we end up getting back to the place where we're going to hire somebody, it could be anywhere from 1 to 10, but there should be enough salary savings available from the other positions to be able to kind of absorb any difference between level 5, which is budgeted for, and something that the actual individual ends up working on.
That answers the question. I appreciate that, Mr. Ellis, because I think that the savings, as you mentioned, comes in that 1 year where you're not hiring them. And then if there's more additional savings, it just depends on what step you hire. So thank you, Madam Chair, and appreciate the questions.
Thank you, Senator. Assemblywoman Tolles.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the indulgence of time, and I have two questions, if I may.
We can barely hear you, Assemblywoman.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me better if I get a little closer to the microphone?
Yes, that's better.
Okay. Thank you. Anyway, thank you. And Mr., and I don't know if I am going to pronounce this correctly, but Mr. Elez, for your first budget hearing, you're doing a wonderful job. And this is a very, very difficult discussion. Probably one of the hardest ones I think we've had, or certainly up there. I want to make sure I didn't miss the number. I know that with the cuts to the third-party cooperative arrangements, we serviced 299 clients in fiscal year 19, 360 clients in fiscal year 20. I don't know if I missed, if we go to an order of selection, the cuts of priority 2 and 3 clients, do we have estimates of how many clients that will impact if we were to cut services to those priority 2 and 3? And forgive me if I missed that number earlier.
This is Michelle Merrill for the record.
Thank you.
To you, Assemblywoman Tolles. If you take an average of give or take 5,000 people in any given year that book rehab services, you can imagine that in priority category 1 being the one that we're going to give our required attention to, we'll be able to serve about 3,700 people, which leaves a little over 1,200 people that will be in those holding patterns, those second and third tiered priority groups that won't receive services until we clear the initial group in priority 1.
Thank you for that clarification. And I'd like to revisit, if I may, slide number 8. And we may have to do a little bit of calculating, but on slide number 8, you talked about the return on investment. And for every $1 invested in Voc Rehab, there's a $2.96 savings for taxpayers over the life of a client. And then for every general fund dollar invested, the state saves $16.73 over the life of a client. And so I just wonder if we could get a calculation of these cuts and what that is going to multiply out to in terms of the cost to the state, as well as the savings that we're losing for our taxpayers. I mean, my very, very rough math, using the $974,550 of proposed cuts in these budgets would equate to 2.9 million in the taxpayer savings lost and 16 million in general fund dollars, but I may be totally off. So I don't expect those calculations right now, but I would appreciate for us to get a bigger picture of these quote unquote cuts really are not saving. They're going to cost us more in the long run. Thank you, Madam Chair, for those questions.
Thank you. Members, any other questions on these two budgets before we move on? Okay, I'm seeing no one raise a hand or anything for a question. So we will move on.
All right, thank you so much, Chair. So we'll proceed with our next budget, which is the budget for first presentation for budget account 3269, which is Bureau of Disability Adjudication. And just as a reminder, the Bureau of Disability Education is adjudicates claims for supplemental security income as well as Social Security disability insurance benefits to ensure financial support for eligible individuals who cannot work due to a disability. Next slide. So on this slide, we just wanted to point out just the scope and the size of the program. As you can see on that top line, on the top table, the bottom line, total Nevada disabled beneficiaries. So in Nevada, there's 118,000 of Nevadans who receive benefits from Social Security Administration, either in form of SSI, supplemental security income, or in form of SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance. The total number of dollars that is paid on average to Nevadans is that bottom number, total dollars at $1.3 billion. So not necessarily million, $1.3 billion. So it's a huge program. It is. It's also what was deemed essential during this whole COVID, and the whole Bureau of Disability Education has been worked throughout the COVID shutdowns, and has been open to serve Nevadans and provided so that individuals who would qualify for these benefits have received them. Also, I'm going to ask Jenna Wan, our Deputy Administrator over BDA, to see if there's any additional points that she wanted to make on the slide.
Thank you. This is Jana Vaughn for the record.
No, I think Drazen said it perfectly. The only thing I'd like to remind is that we are 100% federally funded. And so this $1.3 billion that's average annually that's paid out to Nevadans also obviously goes back into our Nevada economy as well. So I think that's an important statement to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So here we also wanted to just display some information regarding the Bureau of Disability Adjudication. So as you can see, the statewide, there's about 162 staff combined. So that's 121 FTEs as well as 27 intermittent staff and 15 contracted medical professionals that serve our claimants. What we wanted to point out is that the decision accuracy that the agency currently has is at 92.5%. So that is the decisions based on these cases that our agency has made. We then send those once our BDA staff makes a determination on a claimant on a case. That goes to them to Social Security Administration, who will review that and then determine whether they need some more information in order for them to process the case, or whether that individual qualifies. So out of all of those decisions, our state has reached about 92.5%, and is and also let Swan add some more information, but I believe we are also one of the highest states in terms of the accuracy in the region. And Ms. Swan, is there anything else you wanted to add to this slide?
Thank you, Justin. This is Jan Yvonne for the record. Yes, as he said, our federal quality accuracy, this was over the past fiscal year, was 92.5. However, we have recently received kudos, so I have to give a little shout out. We have currently over the past 6 months, we're at 97.1%. And that is, we are leading our region right now in quality, as well as a nation is about at 93%. So we're doing really well with our quality, which is the decision accuracy in these decisions for claimants. I also want to talk about the mean processing time right now. We are at 122.1 days. That was for the federal fiscal year 2020. This is from the moment the claim hits our doors. So before it's even assigned to an adjudicator, it's to take into account the entire process. We do, unfortunately, we expect this to go up a little bit this year because with COVID, we've had a lot of holds that we've had to put on several different types of claims. Some of these have been directed from the Social Security Administration because they didn't want to negatively impact any claimants. So those people who are on benefits, receiving monthly benefits, and those claims come back to our office for a continuing disability review, they did not want to remove any of those from funds if their condition had improved. So we were told to kind of put a stop on those continuing disability reviews. We were also told to, we also had to put a hold on our consultative examinations. If there's not enough medical records in file, we send the claimant to an exam, either mental, physical, x-rays. And because of the pandemic, obviously, for health and safety reasons, those were put on hold for a while. So unfortunately, we do expect that mean processing time to continue to be a little bit higher than what we would like just to the pandemic. The number of claims as well processed, again, for the same reasons. Our goal for that Social Security has given to us for this federal fiscal year is close to 31,000 claims that they expect us to process for federal fiscal year 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide, please. And we just have a couple more slides left. They deal with the two enhancements that we have for this budget account. Again, this is 100% federally funded program. So there's no general funds associated with that. This particular enhancement need 250 has to do with replacing the currently unsupported phone system with the new cloud-based 8x8 system. this was mistakenly left out of Dieter's phone system upgrade due to the, again, during the COVID adoption chaos. I think that all of us have been kind of experiencing, unfortunately. So we still have been able to negotiate and get the bulk rate pricing for this upgrade. And then the phone system will be able to support by our Dieter IT staff. This new cloud-based phone system also has desktop and kind of mobile applications. It really allows our staff to work virtually and be able to conduct their business from wherever they end up kind of working remotely from. We don't have to be tied to a physical location like we had to with the previous phone system. So definitely feel this is a huge upgrade for us, or a huge improvement to our operations. And then next slide, please. The enhancement 806, that's something similar to what we discussed in the budget account 3265 and 54. It would reclassify administrative assistant 1 to rehab technician 3. So due to some similar reasons as the previous, as in the previous budget accounts, this would ensure that we just create a little bit, that we create some efficiency improvements and operational improvements in our bureaus. In one of the that's done by kind of taking some of the cases and some of the busy work away from those individuals that are serving clients, but are and then they're able to focus more on clients or claimants in this particular case. And Ms. Swan, is there anything else you would like to add to this one?
If I can just go back to one on the phone system, as Drazen said, we were just inadvertently left off of that plan originally, but I would like to just comment on how that might be able to help us a little bit as well. As Drazen said, we worked 100% through the pandemic. We did this by being able to allow most of our workers to be able to work from home, work remotely. Social Security Administration gave permission for us to take our computers home, our equipment home, and Social Security Administration also provided cell phones for everybody working from home, so they could still be in contact with the claimant, or calling for medical records or whatever the needs were. However, we have a skeleton crew that's on site still, who are answering all the incoming calls. And currently, if someone does call, there's not a way for us to transfer those calls directly to those cell phones, to those who are working from home. So I know this was a Dieter-wide plan to be able to implement this phone system. And that's why I wanted to mention what it would do for us specifically with those working from home. So thank you for that. As far as the rehab tech upgrade, yes, we currently have 14 rehabilitation technicians too, whose job is to support our adjudicative staff. So like Drazen mentioned, so that our adjudicators can work on analyzing and doing those more critical skills. Our rehab techs really are the ones who are obtaining the medical records for us, who are contacting the claimants for more information on their work history or the forms that they might need completed, who are scheduling our consultative examinations for us. Originally, we had these rehabilitation technicians placed in our adjudication units. And we found that for consistency purposes, we thought it'd be best to just bring them all together and under one unit, so that all adjudicators were getting the same type of support. The training was consistent. Everything was, all the expectations were the same from one rehab tech to the next. However, we don't have a supervisor who can do those things, who has the time to commit to be able to assign all of those tasks to our rehabilitation technicians, and just to make sure that provide those supervisory tasks, make sure everything is running smoothly and consistently across the state. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And with that, this concludes our budget account 3269 presentation. So we'll ask any questions on that.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I know we have a few people with questions, and we'll start with Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I just had a quick follow-up question on the phone system upgrade, and I appreciate that you mentioned that this is part of a department-wide initiative. I was just wondering if you could provide a little bit additional information on where that initiative is at overall, and then based on that, when you would expect the modernization specifically for this budget for the adjudication to be complete, assuming that we move forward with this decision item.
Thank you, Assemblyman Watts. This is Johnson Ellis for the record. So currently, to the best of my knowledge, the 8x8 system for Dieter has been rolled out across the department. The only really agency that's still pending in getting this rolled out is our Bureau of Disability Adjudication. Our hope is that once this budget is passed in this biennium, that we will be starting that. Then day one we'll start get the new phone system in place. One of the benefits is that we currently have the contract with that particular entity in place there. So and we have already started conversations about us getting this phone system implemented and rolled out. So unlike most things that happen in government, where things takes time due to the various reasons or legislative rules, regulations, and whatnot, this particular one we feel would be rolled out very quickly. So for that answer.
Thank you. So just as a quick follow-up, Madam Chair. So given that it's already been rolled out everywhere else, and it's really only within this part of the department that it still needs to be deployed, probably a couple of months after it's approved, you'd probably be able to get this system live. Is that correct?
So Jocelyn, for the record, yes, that will be a fair assumption.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Assemblyman. And I believe Senator Hammond had some questions along the same line.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Exactly. And I apologize. I thought that this was being covered initially in the presentation. So yeah, I do have it came to my attention actually during the last few months, over the last year actually. In the last few months though, I have had a few of my constituents call me up and tell me that they were receiving calls from Dieter. And I saw that in your slide 31, I think some of the answers were there for me, but this particular one, I just wanted to make sure I gave you a chance to kind of tell everybody on the record what's happening and how it's going to improve the system. A few of these constituents called and said that they were getting phone calls from Dieter regarding their benefits. And a lot of times those phone calls would come in and it would say unknown caller on their phone system. So they weren't sure who was calling them, which led to more confusion because, some of these constituents are actually a little older and are always worried about being abused in some way or being taken advantage of. And so there would be a discussion and some conflict between the two. I guess my question is, when you update and this new system goes into place, now when someone is working from home, as we all know, it's probably going to happen more often where people are working from home, when they call out, will the system then allow them to show the recipient of that phone call that it is coming from the state of Nevada, from the Dieter system, from the Dieter or from whoever in your agencies, so that they know and there's a feeling more of relief that that's who's calling? Is that the intention?
Thank you, Senator Hammond, for the question. This is Jocelyn Ellis for the record. So I'll attempt to answer this question, and then I'll field it over to Dieter's main office if there's any follow-up on that. So yes, once this phone system is rolled out, we would like the individuals that receive the phone call would be able to see the phone number which is calling them. The phone number that will show up would not be the phone number to the extension of that individual, but there would be a general number for Dieter that's there in the system. So I don't know if there's anybody else at the Dieter headquarters that may be able to provide some additional details on that.
Marilyn, do you want to provide additional information?
For this, Dr. Mellor Delmont, IDP Administrator for Dieter, for the record. Drozen is correct. Once if you're working from home or any remote location, and you make a call to claim it, that particular person will see a Dieter number come up, and it will be the Dieter main number, not necessarily the person's individual office number come up.
Well, thank you so much. I think that's great. And I think it's, when we learn lessons and then we, make adjustments, I think that certainly the people appreciate that. And that's going to be great, because I know that in the future, we're probably working a lot more from home when we're able to. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much for allowing me the question.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I just have one question for you. As we move towards reopening and you get the system in place, will you still have a number of staff members working remotely, or will the majority of them return to the office locations?
Thank you, Chairman Moreno. For the record, this is Johnson Ellis. So was that question, just to clarify, was that question just specifically for Bureau of Disability Education or for the Rehabilitation Division as a whole?
As a whole.
So to answer, so this is Johnson Ellis for the record. Once we start reopening, we feel that we have been working on a plan for a good part of a year now. I think since we got closed down every few months, it seemed like we may get to a place where the openings are imminent or somewhere in the near future. So we've been working on plans as to how we would phase in staff coming in. I think there's definitely a lot of situations that we have to look out there, the economy that folks are dealing with before we decide to bring everybody in. Part of that is going to be just what kind of mandates are there in terms of having distances between the offices. Also, we have a lot of folks maybe who might be in school district where their kids might not be going to school full time. So there's going to be, I feel, some balance that, and we'll have flexibility provide flexibility to our staff for us to have a little bit more of a gradual reopening. Once the state says that we should open our offices, we're definitely ensure that all of our offices are open in the manner they were before, with some flexibilities to staff to either works adjustments to their work schedules, whether they're working now 4/10s versus 5/8, maybe sharing some offices where we have staff that are working from home because of their childcare needs or whatnot. So we'll be flexible and working with all the staff on ensuring that we have a phased-in approach that takes everybody's needs into account, but also looks at the fact that we will be serving our constituencies, and do we have enough staff available there to serve anybody that seeks service. I don't know, Michelle Merrill, if there's anything else that you wanted to add to that, as well as Jenna.
Thank you, Michelle Merrill, for the record. Absolutely, we are deep in our plans to reopen. We're co-located in all of the Job Connects and the One Stop statewide. So we're working closely with our Dieter partners to make sure that is as smooth as possible. In our own independent offices, North and South, Las Vegas and Reno, we are going to be doing an approach where we have client use rooms. So the clients can come in, there will be a computer there with a camera, and they can connect to either a counselor who's either in the office if it's not suitable to meet face-to-face for any particular reason, or if their counselor is working from home that day, they'll be able to meet with their counselor virtually from home. We think that that's going to enable us to not only be space conservative, but it's allowing us to ensure that we're creating enough appropriate distance so that there's room in the office building so that we're not exceeding capacity. And we think that that's going to be the best way for our rollout. And I'll let Jana Vaughn speak to BDA.
Thank you, Jana Vaughn, for the record. I think Drazen hit the nail on the head. We are, BDA has been 100% effective and efficient in being able to complete all their tasks from home during this time. It has been a learning experience for sure. But having said that, we're going to cautiously, move forward. Perhaps a hybrid approach is kind of what we're talking about, where maybe there's a couple of days in the office and a couple of days at home. Again, taking into consideration, as Drazen said, childcare issues, things like that for our staff are still, it's still really a tumultuous time, and so we're just playing it by ear. But because we have shown success working from home, Social Security Administration does support that at whatever level we decide to move forward with it.
Thank you. Thank you for the answer. Members, any other questions on this budget 3269 before we move on? Okay, seeing none, we can continue with the presentation. I believe we have the budget amendments.
Thank you all so much. I appreciate you being kind to me during this presentation, and I'll pass it on to the next presenter.
You did an amazing job.
Great, thanks. Okay, good morning. This is Elisa Caffaretta, the director of DETR. I'm gonna let our rehab folks know they're welcome to stay, they're welcome to go, whatever they need to do. I'm here to present the budget amendments for the Employment Security Division budget, as well as the IDP budget and the DETR administration budgets that we mentioned to you when we presented on March 4th. I'm joined in the room, you haven't been introduced to Jeff Frischman, who is back from retirement for a brief period. He's our subject matter expert in employment security. Jenny Castleman is our deputy director. David Schmidt is our economist. Chris Sewell is our chief operating officer. We also have on the line Marilyn Delmont, who is our IDP administrator, and Kitty DeSocio, who is our chief financial officer. So because the situation at DETR has been incredibly fluid since the time we submitted our budget, we have been working with the governor's finance office to get as clear a picture for budgeting purposes as we can. That said, we are still getting guidance from the Department of Labor in terms of the extensions and the new policies that have rolled out. We've only gotten preliminary guidance on the American Rescue Plan. We're expecting more detail on that. And the updates on our funding situation are ongoing as well. So in looking at how to fund the budget for the coming biennium, we identified the following funding sources, and hopefully you have our presentation and we'll get caught up here as we go. But as I think you all are aware, the administration of the unemployment insurance program is 100% federally funded. So DETR receives a base grant from DOL each year, the Department of Labor each year, and then based on our quarterly workload reports, we receive above base grants, and that's sort of the basic administrative funding that we have. In response to the COVID pandemic, Congress has allocated administrative funds for the implementation of these several new programs that you are aware we have implemented over the past year. And every time they extend those programs, they extend the administrative funding. And then in recognition of the significant amount of fraud that we are seeing along with all other states, Congress has specifically awarded grants for fraud prevention targeted to the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program and the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation Programs, which is where we're seeing the most fraudulent applications, although we're seeing fraud everywhere. We know that we have this funding because we have received either information or notices of awards. For the base grant for next year, we have been told it will not go up or down more than 5%. So we have a pretty good idea of what that will be. And for the above base grant, we've calculated our projections based on the workload that we are reporting. So we feel fairly solid that the revenue sources we've identified to date will be there. On the next slide, we've talked about this many times. It is very challenging, at least in these times when we're seeing so many additional funding sources, to project out what our revenue will be. We do build our budget based on the expected yearly base grant. Those are given on the federal fiscal year, so it's a little bit off from the state fiscal year. And then again, we make quarterly workload reports for our above base grants, but there's a significant lag time in that money coming in. So we've reported our above base or our workload from the last quarter of calendar year 2020. We know we're getting about $7 million in an above base grant for that period, but we have yet to actually receive that money. And then, as you know, we need to bring a work program to the IFC to bring that funding and a work plan in. And then if we're doing contracting, then it's another month or two to get to the Board of Examiners to get that money into place and in action in our budget. So normally the lag time in the above base grants ends up with a little bit of carryover. As Assemblywoman Carlton noted, you know, that's problematic and we want to have as much transparency in our budget. So to the extent possible, we're trying to show this money that we are have pretty good certainty we are bringing in and put it into the budget. So you can see where the money is coming from and how it will be spent. Because our projections are a little bit more challenging beyond next fiscal year, we are only doing a budget amendment for the state fiscal year 2022. And then if we still have needs for state fiscal year 2023, we'll come back to the IFC with specific work programs and projections for that. I think we are all quite hopeful that we will be in a much better place and we will not need to do a significant change or bring in significant additional dollars. So moving on, the specific amount from these sources that we've identified, you'll see throughout the presentation, but this is just a high level overview. The regular UI grant and above base grant are approximately almost $11 million. About $4 million is in the PUA administrative funds that we have gotten from and are getting from the Department of Labor. And then specifically fraud grant activities are just under $1 million. And then some of the requests here will be cost allocated. So all of the programs in DETR will pick up a portion of those costs. The next slide is a high-level overview of the positions. The budget amendment is primarily for intermittent positions. These have generally already been approved over the last year and funded as we've responded to the COVID pandemic. We originally were very wildly optimistic and we're hoping that we would no longer need these positions as of July 30th this year. And unfortunately, the need still remains high. We are still seeing a large number of new claims come in with new programs at the federal level and new extensions of the existing programs. And the continued backlog that we're working through, we anticipate we need these positions through state fiscal year 2022. And it is our fervent goal that we get caught up and got current and then can continue more to sort of a normal order of operations in the second year of the biennium. So we're going to go through these budget amendments individually, and then we'll stop for questions after each one. The first budget is 4772, which is the unemployment insurance. This includes 183 intermittent fiscal or full-time equivalent positions. They're broken down as follows, and this actually is the same information that we had in our presentation for you on March 4th. So I'm just going to highlight the funding sources that we've identified for each of these activities. So the call center support is 94 positions. This will be funded half by the UI grant, the unemployment insurance grant, and half by the PUA administrative funds. These positions make up teams that can answer the phone, more increasingly resolve issues in one stop, will allow for more cross-training between PUA and UI, and will put us in a solid position for the date when the contract staff will be reduced or that contract will expire. The fraud team is 36 intermittent positions. Again, these are teams that are on the front end reviewing questionable identity cases and flags, unfreezing debit cards, and working with our banking vendor to make sure eligible claimants are getting their funds. This is the team that is issuing correct 1099s and does waivers for overpayments. This is funded in part by the UI grant fund, above base funding if needed, but this is where a significant amount of the fraud grant will be spent. And the next slide, you have the benefit accuracy measurement unit, which is our quality control. We're required by the Department of Labor to have this activity to do reporting and review of improper payments. This was waived for a small period, but we need to have these positions to undertake this activity now. This will be funded by the UA grant and partly by the above base grant. The contributions unit is 26 intermittent positions. Again, these are teams that bring in the funds from employers. This is the money that goes into the trust fund for the regular UI program. They handle wage protests, which is part of our backlog. And they also will be working on some financial reporting. It's an area that we need to streamline our process. This also is funded by the UI program, half through the regular UI grant and half through the above base funding. On the next slide, we have 11 positions for the appeals unit. This team is going to continue to see an increase in workload because they're a little later in the process, just because of the increased number of programs, both UI and PUA, and the increased number of cases. We anticipate their workload will continue to go up for some time. This is funded, this particular team that we're adding is funded 25% by the UI grant and 75% by the PUA administrative funds, because a large number of these appeals are in the PUA program. The 12 positions for the unemployment insurance support services team is funded entirely through the UI grant. This team does the policy and programming analysis that is needed to, as Congress updates programs and provides us new direction, they calculate the business requirements for each of these programs and work with our technical teams to implement them. They're the team that helps us work with the programmers to figure out how we layer additional weeks and make sure folks get the full complement of weeks they are entitled to. And then there's one one position, which is PIO, which will be dedicated to the Employment Security Division programs. We recognize that and want to respond to the need to be more proactive in our communications with claimants. The strike force identified a need to engage directly with claimants. We don't have a specific position for that the strike force recommended, but a large part of this person's time would be dedicated to engaging with claimants and advocating for their issues and serving to educate and guide claimants as well, just as was recommended. This would be funded in half by the UI grant and half by PUA administrative funds. So for this program, you can see in summary, it's 183 intermittent positions funded. I've done the sums here, the totals for the UI grant, PUA administrative funds, above base grant, and the fraud grants. And you can see that this is an amendment only reflects in state fiscal year 2022. And we would revisit if we need to for 2023. So that is budget 4772. And we'll stop for any questions you might have on that.
Thank you. I believe Assemblyman Roberts has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentations today. My questions were on the intermittent positions. In the summary here, you talk about the 199 positions, and those are those additional positions, or are they encumbered now?
Elisa Caffaretta for the record. As the pandemic got started, we came to the Interim Finance Committee and requested additional intermittent positions. And these are all positions that have been approved and funded through this emergency funding. And we were hoping not to have to continue them. We were hoping we were going to be all caught up by now. But again, the programs are extended, and so we are needing to continue these positions.
Thank you. That's what I thought in reading the material and through your presentation. I'm curious, are we carrying a lot of vacancies? Number one, and two is, we would revisit this in 2023 if we still needed the amount and of these workers. That's basically the plan?
Elisa Caffaretta for the record. We currently have in these positions, we have 64 vacancies. So we have been working to fill these positions as we have gone along. And some we just haven't been able to fill, or we are in the process. As you may know, Smart 21 was just recently implemented in the state, which put a short hiatus on our hiring. So we have a couple of things that are on hold. In some of these positions, we have seen some turnover, especially in the claims representative sort of level of job. Those are pretty challenging positions at the moment. If you're answering the phone, it's not the most fun time you could ever have, but we're filling them as we can go. And then we do anticipate that we will let them, through attrition, we will sort of start reducing this number because we don't think that we'll need to carry this full complement into 2023. And yes, we will be reevaluating towards the end of the fiscal year and come back to you with a report on what's needed to go forward, if any of these positions.
Thank you. And then one last follow-up, Madam Chair. And so the vacancies and the monies from the federal funds that we would have, would you be able to carry that over into 2023 if you needed to?
Elisa Caffaretta for the record. I do believe there, and I might call on Kitty DeSocio to provide additional detail. there are limitations to what we can carry over. For example, with our above base grant, if we haven't obligated the funds, they can only be carried over for technology modernization projects. And while we certainly have that need, it makes it challenging if what we need is to have staff be working on positions. But we'll keep you apprised of that. And if Kitty wants to add anything, I can't tell if she's on.
Yeah, Kitty DeSocio, Chief Financial Officer. For the record, Director Cafferetta is completely accurate with her statements regarding the carryovers.
Thank you very much for the answers, and I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Hammond.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and you can cut me off at any time because I don't have a specific question about this, but I know we have Ms. Cafferetta on the line, and I've been receiving calls and emails in the last 2 days, and we can take this offline, but I figured if everybody's here, maybe you could help us a little bit with constituents who are talking about having their histories erased and having, an invite to IDEMIA, because I think that you guys are entering into a new benefits package. So if you want to comment now, 'cause that way we know how to answer some of these constituents, or if you want to just take it offline, we can do that as well.
Thank you, Elisa Cafferetta, for the record. We're gonna make claims examiners out of all of you yet. So thank you for the opportunity to respond to this. Yes, so the new federal law requires us to have an ID verification up front for all of our programs, and IDMe has come online for PUA. And it's now not just for select folks, it's for everyone who's applying for a continued week or a new week. So folks will see this for a short period of time. It is new, but it is a legit request that is in response to the federal law. And there is an error in the message that the programmer put, that the vendor posted, and it's right now giving Arizona's phone number to call for help, which is not helpful, but we hope to have that fixed this morning. So if folks will just hang in for a little bit on that, we'll get caught up on the IDMe verification. And then, yes, we have been working to implement the extended weeks under the American Rescue Plan, and inadvertently that made it, not that folks' information was wiped out, but it did, because it was a new year, make it so that they couldn't see their prior claims weeks. And we've asked the vendor to make it so folks can see their full record, including all prior weeks. So we hope to have that done as soon as possible as well. We are aware of it. Folks' appeals are still there. Their benefit weeks are still there. Their issues are still there. We just need to make it visible to them again.
That is so helpful. Thank you very much for the clarification and helpful information. I'll probably follow up with you later on just to kind of talk a little bit about more of that IDMe program. But thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing that question.
Thank you. Members, any other questions on 4772 before we move on to 3272? Okay. Then let's move on. Thank you.
Elisa Cafferetta, for the record. 3272 is the Dieter administration budget, and we have 3 requests here. Again, these you've seen, but just to provide some detail in terms of the funding. The first is 1 new position in our fiscal management team. We have a new requirement to prepare financial statements for the trust fund, which we did not have before. So this is a new responsibility for us. It requires a slightly different skill set than we have. So we are asking for a new position here that will have the accounting skills. This would be funded entirely by the UI grant because it is for the trust fund. The second request is reclassifying a management analyst to a so 1 And this provides more opportunities for advancement within our fiscal management team. And it also is more in line with the way other departments handle their accounting supervision. And the third request here is also a reclassification from an assistant to the director position to a second deputy director position. Some of you may be aware that Dieter used to have 2 deputy directors, and over the years between the staffing reductions and the budget cuts, we lost one of those positions. What I would say we have learned in the pandemic situation is that we really truly need staff leadership at the executive level to make sure both the operations and support units can work just hand in hand with the programs. It's very likely as we go forward that we're going to need more technical support to be able to deliver our program services across the board. The integration and timing of our finances also makes it critical that we integrate this conversation at the leadership level to make sure we can deliver services and make the long-term updates to operations that we need. And finally, as we've discussed today, as we're looking at as each of our units is making its plans to return to opening operations, we're definitely sort of looking at lessons learned and the best way forward in terms of the number of offices that we have, the number of folks we have working from home, sort of the hybrid approaches that are going to allow us to best deliver our services. So we think we need this two deputy directors to carry that leadership conversation and integration on as we go forward and really have to reinvent ourselves continually and provide services needed. So the next slide gives you the overview of the 2 reclassifications and the additional FTE that is coming from both the UI grant and the 2 reclassifications are from cost allocation. So they'll be spread out to all of the programs. Are there any questions on this budget amendment?
Yes, there are a few questions. We'll start with Assemblywoman Carlton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess my question goes to the issue with the State Comptroller's Office no longer doing the comprehensive enterprise, the financial statements for you. I won't go through the big long name of the financial statement. So I know that happened in 19, but could you explain why they're not doing it for you any longer? It seems to be more their area of expertise. And do you have the staff to do this, or is this going to be another burden on top of everything else that we're asking you to do to help folks stay stable in their lives right now?
I'm going to ask, this is Elisa Cafaretta. I'm going to ask Kitty DeSocio to give you a little bit of the history. I was not here when that decision was made, but it is in terms of staffing, that is the reason we're asking for this additional position to handle that work.
And
Yes.
I'm sorry, which additional position would handle that work?
It's the one full-time position that we're requesting here.
The management analyst.
This Elisa Cafaretta for the record, this would be this is the first line. It's decision unit E231, and it's the trust fund accountant.
The accountant position. Okay, that's good. But if we could figure out why you're having to do this rather than the comptroller shop do it, why? Just curious.
Yes, this is Kitty DeSocio, Chief Financial Officer for Dieter, for the record. On June 24th, the State Controller informed Dieter that we would be responsible for compiling our financial statements and having them independently audited prior to them being rolled into the comprehensive annual financial report. This is common practice in other departments within the state organization, which I cannot speak to. I would have to refer back to the state controller for the individual departments, but she did explain that to me when this came about. So what this does is it brings Dieter more in line with the remainder of the state agencies who have an independent enterprise fund. So the comprehensive unemployment fund is outside of the executive budget, and it needs to be audited and accounted for in accordance with those guidelines. I hope that answered your question, Assemblywoman Carlton.
In general, is this one of the GASB recommendations that we have to comply with?
I would have to defer to the state controller. I don't think it would actually have to comply with GASB per se. But again, I will get back to you and reconfirm with the state controller on the regulatory guidance of why this decision was made by the state controller.
Okay, it just seems to me it's been done in that shop. It got done well. Now we're transferring it out. So the last thing I wanted to do with everything that you have to do over the next couple of years is add on a task that could end up causing issues down the road. So my other question would be the new deputy director. This one has been an issue off and on for a number of years because of the way the deputy director is funded. So if you could just elaborate a little bit more on the because there is an assistant to the director right now that can handle some functions. So would there still be an assistant, or would the new deputy take place of the assistant?
Thank you. This is Lisa Caffaretta for the record. Yes, it's the latter. We are asking to reclassify the assistant to the director position to a deputy director position, which is why you see the amount here, which isn't a full salary, but it's just the difference. So we would not have that assistant to the director position, but would clearly have two deputy directors who are responsible for, on one side, the program areas and helping guide that team. And then the second deputy director would be responsible for what I consider sort of operations. So the IT department, or IDP as we call it, the audit function, one of the PIOs, and the human resources. And it really, what I think one of the large lessons of the pandemic has been that we need to ensure that our technology solutions and our staffing solutions can work together, because we have these fluctuations in demand and staffing. And so we need to sort of make sure that these conversations are happening at the executive leadership level, so that we can coordinate the funding streams that are challenging, to say the least, and the response that we're putting together. And really I think for Dieter, it's very important for us to have this level of conversation at the executive leadership, so that we are doing a better job of putting together long-term solutions and strategic plans, rather than just putting out fires. And that really is our focus for the biennium coming up, is putting together these long-term solutions that integrate all of the resources in the best way to provide the services our clients need.
And thank you, and I appreciate that, but this committee has sat and listened to a lot of vacancies being held open for a year that are frontline folks that provide direct services to Nevadans. So we always want to be careful, if we're talking about an upper level position, that it truly is needed going forward. So we always have to ask these questions, and this will have an impact, I believe, on some of the cost allocations. And we hope, we pray that our unemployment gets back down to the 4% level in the next couple of years. So we have to make decisions based on the future of where we think we might be, because once we hire someone, we don't want to turn around and eliminate that position again. So thank you very much. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, this is Kitty DeSocio for the record. Might I clarify something that Assembly Carlson was asking about the trust fund accountant position? I just wanted to clarify something.
Yes, please do.
Yes, Kitty DeSocio for the record. I just wanted to make clear that the independent audit of those financial statements has never been done before. And bringing that financial statement compilation and audit underneath Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation is actually strengthening the internal controls for the state and providing a more, analyzed and compiled set of books to roll up into the comprehensive annual financial report. So it really is strengthening the ability for the entire state. Just wanted to make that clear, that it's new to the state, and it'll help in the long run.
Thank you for that clarification. I am not seeing any other members with questions on this. We will move on to 3274. I know the Senate will be having floor as soon as we wrap up. So let's make this kind of quick.
Thank you, Lisa Capretta for the record. Finally, 3274 is our Information Development and Processing Unit. This is IT for everyone else. This has 16 intermittent positions in the IDP team. And just to give you the context, we really have not added any staff to this team for years, although the technology, equipment, and the number of programs we run have increased substantially. IT doesn't just do the technology, but they ensure that all of the staff that we have, including our loan staff from the Division of Welfare and our contract staff who are helping us in various aspects of the program, can get online and have access to the programs that they need to provide support. So this is, again, a request for a continuation of the positions that were started and funded in state fiscal year 2021. There will be a developer team, which are mostly the IT pros. These folks will work on database applications, web support, application development, programming work, cybersecurity, forensics, and project management. This is the team that keeps UINV up and running. So they are miracle workers in many ways, but we've made a lot more demands on them. So just having this intermittent support to get us to implement all of the new programs will be critical for us continuing to catch up on the work that we have to do. There also is a tech team. These are the folks who provide tech support for field services and the help desk. Those are the people that get all of our staff online and up and running. And there are two specific positions in IDP that are assigned to the fraud unit to assist with the fraud work we are doing. So the development team and the tech team are generally funded through the UI grant. And then the fraud, the two who are assigned to the fraud unit are funded 75% from the fraud grant and 25% from the first one's the PUA fraud grant. The second one is the PEUC fraud grant. And there are some additional costs for the EATS productivity suite. So again, the funding for these positions comes from the UI grant and the fraud grants, and that supports our ongoing work to get caught up and implement all the new programs. So I'll answer any questions you have on 3274.
Thank you. I believe the question that I did have, you covered in your comments and presenting it. I did just have one overlaying question. So what actions would your agency take if the federal funding does not materialize as projected in the budget amendments for all of this, for the 21-23 biennium?
Elisa Caffaretta, for the record, thank you for the question. We do feel quite confident that we know that the vast majority of this money is coming. There might be some adjustments up or down a certain percentage. And we could look at ending intermittent positions earlier if that were required. The other option we could discuss with you if there were a significant change from what we believe the future holds is the Department of Labor recommends that states borrow from their penalties and interest funds to sort of cover the gap between the time that you've done the work and you ultimately get your above base award. We know there are a lot of concerns about using the penalties and interest funding, but as a bridge loan, essentially to cover short-term work that
just in case. Let's see.
Don't know what that question was. That is another option that we could use, but we do feel very solid in these projections.
Thank you for the answer. Members, any other questions on the presentation? All right, seeing none, I thank you so much. It was a small amount of material, but very important and a lot of information in it. So I thank you so much for joining us here again today.
Thanks for having us.
So members, that brings us up to the last item on our agenda, and that would be public comment. And I would ask our broadcast staff if they could check our waiting room and see if we have anyone in the waiting room wishing to submit public comment.
Chair, this is Michael from Broadcast. I will check and see. If you would like to make public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, I have one caller in the queue already. I will go ahead and queue them up.
Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 120. Please slowly state and spell your name. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Stephen Cohen for the record. Stephen with a V. Cohen as in the Assemblywoman, but no known relation. I've been waiting for this day for 6 weeks since I found out when it would be. The one couple of things I want to highlight. The Assembly side now has a couple of additional exhibits concerning the questions for order of selection. But I think we overlooked one big piece of rehab in the presentation, which I spend a good 2 pages on in my prepared remarks, pages 2 and 3, which is the 700-hour program. There may be a bill coming, an amendment coming on it. It just got pulled this morning for the second straight regular meeting day of the committee. So stay tuned on that. If not, we still have a couple of other at-bats that kind of wouldn't violate single subject. I think we need to, as we recover the economy, give people with disabilities the most potential opportunities for employment. The stats in the presentation, while reliable, were very much out of date. People with disabilities have been substantially affected in employment by the pandemic. And if rehab leadership knows how to find me, and the committee as well, I'd be happy to be part of those discussions on how to better include folks. With that, Madam Chair, one last thing. UI, a lot of the issues that have been excuse me, addressed by the director staff are also happening on excuse me, the regular UI side. Sad to report that the Supreme Court rejected my amicus submission last week, but I'll make the same offer to the director's office in terms of helping however I can on a pro bono basis. And with that, Madam Chair, thank you, and I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen, for your comments. BPS, do we have anyone else wishing to make public comment?
Yes, I'll queue up the next person now.
Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 653. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning. This is Doralee U.L. Martinez, DORALEE UCHEL-Martinez, MARTINEZ. Thank you so much, Madam Chair and Vice Chair and the committee. I'm sure you all know me by now. I am totally blind, and I used to be a vocational rehabilitation consumer. I went to college, got my degree at University of Nevada, Reno as a social worker. I'd like to say that they're doing an okay job to assist people with disability. I'll give them that credit, but it was an uphill battle for me. And I know that a lot of people, my colleagues and peers, they want to speak, but they do not want to get retaliated against because they're still a client. So I am speaking on behalf of all of us, and I ditto what Mr. Stephen Cohen said, and we are here. People with disability of Nevada, Reno, that want to help people who are disabled and going to school and try to make it in the workforce. Dieter has not been able to successfully find employment for us, and the 700-hour program is not, is not sufficiently employing those with disability. I have a friend who is blind, went there. They did not know how to assist and accommodate the person who is visually impaired to get a job. And she or he is sufficient, has a degree, but they were not able to employ them. So please, let's have our place at the table, and we are here to help those of us who have degrees and know how to work with technology, assistive technology. And I would want to bring your attention to their website, which is not 100% accessible for people who are visually impaired. And I have brought this to their attention, but it has remained to be seen to be accessible. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you so much for your comments and for giving us that information. I appreciate it. BPS, do we have anyone else wishing to make public comment?
To make public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public comment line is open and working. However, we have no more people in the queue.
Thank you so much. So with that concludes our meeting for today. And I would like to thank our presenters, the committee broadcast staff, you're always wonderful, and the members of the public who were able to join us here virtually. With that, our meeting is adjourned, and I wish you all a very productive day.